All right. Are we live? I think we're live. Wonderful. Awesome. So, I forgot to advertise for this one, except for on the Discord channel. So we'll see how many people we actually get. But today we are finally getting to do the actual stream that was supposed to be. Oh, Ricardo. So it wasn't 2 hours. I'm not 2 hours 7 minutes. I'm not sure. What do you mean by that? I'm not sure. Did it say something on the stream? No idea. Anywho, I'll keep an eye out for your comment. Today we are finally doing what we were supposed to do last week, but which technical difficulties prevented us from doing. We are going to learn about making realistic MIDI mockups. All right, so I still have everything that I prepped for last week all set up. We have a short little chord progression written for strings, all performed in just vanilla Albion 1. All right, haven't done anything, haven't touched velocity, haven't done anything, just pencil tool in the chords. We're gonna hear how it sounds. Actually sounds pretty nice, all right? And then we're gonna learn how to start using some more libraries to create a more realistic performance. Pre-screen said I was going live in 2 hours? Oh, no idea. No idea why it would say that. I noticed that, the pre-screen, and then like the title page or something I had. Like the thumbnail wasn't what I originally created. Anywho, whatever. As people show up, we'll have a good time. For now, let's listen to the short little idea we're going to be playing with. And let's see how it sounds just out of the box. I'm going to pull up. Actually, let's do this. We'll pull this MIDI editor up. And we'll pull up Albion 1 so we can see the library. Is there a way to make this smaller? Don't think there's a way to make it smaller. Never mind. It was a good idea, but we'll just do this. All right. Beautiful. All right, so all right, awesome. So it's already kind of like freaky little, like dramatic little chord progression played in strings. Sounds pretty good. All right, welcome. All right, awesome. Can people hear it? I should double check that. Can you actually hear the strings? Welcome, Kuda. Welcome, Tokayaki. Welcome, Ricardo. I should have welcomed you, Ricardo. I'm sorry. Awesome. Welcome, people. We're getting some people to show up. Can you actually hear the strings? All right, I'm going to assume that you can. If you can't hear it, let me know. But here we've got our vanilla little just background. Now here, the first thing I like to do is I like to combine a couple different libraries. All right, so you'll notice that I have violin 1, violin 2, violas, cello, and basses. I've already swapped out from an ensemble patch of just strings to individual tracks for each section. And on top of that, I have multiple tracks for each section. That's a good reason why. The main reason is, and the first track, I am using Cinestrings from Musio. All right? This creates a very beautiful, very lush, very detailed sound. So I use Musio and Cinestrings to create the base of my sound for each of the strings. And then I'm going to use Albion 1, which is more of a ensemble patch. It's not specifically just violins, it's just a bunch of strings. I use it to create more of kind of like a fleshed out quality. Now you don't need to do this. This is just how I tend to use this set. This is the setup I like to use. If you watched my Skyrim tutorial, or you watched any of the pieces I wrote in that style, all of them were written with these two libraries, Cinestrings from Musio and Albion 1 from Spitfire, to create a more robust quality in the sound. But you don't need to use multiple libraries. If you are going to use a library, I'm going to recommend Musio. Mostly because Musio is super cheap and they have this massive selection. I think it's like $10 a month. And you get access to all of this. I am affiliated with Musio. So that's another thing, is if you want to support the channel, check out the description of this stream. You will have a link and a coupon code that you can use. If you use that link to purchase a subscription, or you can buy it just outright, you get, there's a kickback to the channel, which is very helpful. But I do genuinely love these libraries, and I've been using them long before I became affiliated with them. So, welcome. Let's see here. All right, so we're getting some people here. Suggestion for future stream, explaining some terms such as lush and fleshed out. All right. Welcome. Thank you. Awesome. Yes, I will explain it. So when I said, first off, lush. Lush, it's, how do I explain lush? Very kind of rich, like multiple layers to the sound. So creating a lush sound with multiple libraries means that there's multiple layers, there's multiple personalities, multiple different sounds contributing to the, or contributing, I don't know, I can't talk today, contributing to the overall sound and the quality, right? Now, when I say flesh out, I mean, I'll give an example in just a moment. We have a violin sound here. That's well and good. It's a beautiful library, beautiful quality. Down here, we have the cello from Cinesamples. Again, very, very beautiful sound. So they're slightly different, though. This is a violin section recorded in the same space and a cello recorded in the same space. So I use Albion 1, which is just an ensemble of all of them being played at the same time instead of the individual sections, as a little bit of a glue to kind of like add just a little extra little kind of connectivity. I don't know how I'm talking. Not gonna lie, I'm running on very little sleep right now, people. I'm working on another soundtrack, and I have been up since like 4:30. But what was I gonna say? Yeah. Anywho, so let's talk about taking this chord progression and making it sound more realistic. So we've got quite a few more people on right now. Let's listen to the chord track. I'm sorry. Again, sleep deprived. Let me grab a drink. We're going to listen to our chord progression, and then I have a list of different things we're going to do. We're going to start with panning. We will then apply reverb, and we will then apply a little bit of EQ. These 3 steps are going to help create the illusion that all of our libraries were recorded in the same room. The goal is to try to create the illusion that all of these instruments are real instruments in a real stage, and that their sounds are all interacting with each other as if they were all being played in a physical space. Then we're going to talk about recording the parts using either a keyboard or a pencil tool. Then we will talk about adding specifically continuous controller MIDI data, so MIDI tools to help make the performance more realistic, before a little tip on tempo mapping and making your piece sound just like it's being performed more naturally. All right, so this is all on the docket today. I'm very excited to talk about all this stuff, but for now, let's listen to what we're working with. All right, very dark, very dramatic, nice little string sound. When we are done, we will come back to this and see how it sounds. But for now, we want to focus on creating a more realistic performance. So like I said, the first 3 steps here, panning, reverb, and EQ, the whole point is to create the illusion that everyone is on the same stage. If you want a much more detailed description of this, you can go to my website, go to my blog, and then, which one is it? It is this one, Mastering Digital Spaces for Realistic Music. Essential mic positioning, panning, and reverb. This one right here, you can read through it. It's taken from my ebook on creating realistic MIDI mockups. We won't worry about mic positions just yet because we're not going to go too deep today. But panning. The first thing we're learning about today is panning, which talks about the stereo width and stereo direction. The idea is basically we want to create a specific location for each instrument on our imaginary stage. So some instrument sections are going to be a little wider than others. Some are going to be a bit narrower. So like a single flute is going to have a very narrow spot. We know the flute is coming from right there. Violin ones, there's about 16 of them. All right, so they're coming from a general that direction kind of thing. Now again, if we want to go a little more in depth, I've got specific descriptions of what you can work with here and there. For our purposes, right here and right now, we want to just create a slight little map for each of our instruments. Now, some instruments and some sound libraries are already going to come pre-panned. So if you have headphones, it's a lot easier to tell with headphones. But the violin ones in Musio are already panned pretty far to the left. You can kind of tell if you take, it's a little quieter on my right side, louder on my left. So it's pre-panned. We don't have to worry about the Musio libraries. However, the Albion 1 is not pre-panned. So we want to create a slight general position for each of these instruments. Now, if you look up an orchestral seating chart, you just look up orchestra seating chart, you can find them pretty much, they're pretty simple. We notice that the violin 1 is seated left of the stage. The second violin's being just a little bit further. Now, you're going to want to experiment because every library is a little different. But I have found from previous experience that Albion 1, if I want to imitate a violin position, works pretty well around 30. 30 left. 30, 29, somewhere around there. Again, you can go back and forth between listening to this. Again, if you have headphones, it's easier. I'd say that's about right. Again, it's typically you can just use the panning controls within your library. If you don't have panning controls within your library, you can go into your DAW, and again, you can use panning here. Panning. So this is not one that I typically use. I don't use, where's panning in Cubase? Does anybody know where panning in Cubase is? I don't use this view. I would typically go down here. We would look for standard panner, left and right, and you can use this. And again, you can go up and down a little bit to find the right mix for what you're looking for. Experiment. If you want to get super fancy, you can use a dedicated plugin. My go-to plugin is 2C Precedence. And you'll see that I actually have presets that I have created. So for violin 1, I am able to create not only the location on stage, left, right, but also the distance, how far away I want it on the stage. So it's very intricate. You don't need this though. Especially if you're just starting out, you will get more than enough of an impact using just the built-in panner within your sound library. All right, so this tends to be my go-to for the most part with mockups, is just use the built-in panner for the instrument, because especially if you've got nice libraries like Albion 1 or Musio Cinesamples, they're going to have pretty quality panning. So again, about 31 for violins 1. And then for violin 2, again, I'm using two libraries, Cinesamples, which again, you can listen using your headphones, and you can experiment a little bit around. Again, because I've used these libraries a bit, I have found that around 15 left works well for Albion 1. So again, all I'm doing is I'm using my orchestral seating chart to try and mimic the panning location for each instrument on stage. On, again, Musio, Cinesamples, each of these instruments came pre-panned. So you can use those as a reference. Using your ear, it'll typically work pretty well. For Albion 1, I'm using an ensemble patch, which is just generic long strings. And I'm using this as a way to kind of like flesh out, give a little more body to the sound of each section. Again, you don't need to layer libraries. You can if you want. It's not necessary, but it is a helpful tool to kind of create a more rich, complex sound. And because it's an ensemble patch and it's not actually panned, I'm having to pan each one to make it fit a little bit more like the specific string section that it's supposed to be mimicking. All right, welcome. Let's see the comments here. Which DAW are you using? Kudo, can't see clearly because of my network. Which DAW are you using? I am using Cubase Pro 9.5. It's ancient, but I know it super, super well. And I just haven't had a need to update recently since. So yeah, it's Cubase. It's just an older version. Hasn't stopped me from finding work. So, oh, thank you. Ricardo answered it. All right, so thank you. Okay, Inviction. Out of topic, but I want to learn music theory, but don't play piano. I use a DAW to learn. Would it still be useful to learn how to write music on staff, or should I stick to DAW-based methods? If you don't ever intend on writing sheet music, then you don't need to learn how to read sheet music. Personally, I am of the belief that it's very useful. Learning new skills is always useful. Personally, I use notation for orchestration. So I will typically sketch an idea in my DAW. Then I will go into Finale, which has now been discontinued, so I got to upgrade to Dorico. I will orchestrate in Dorico because I find that orchestrating in notation just works better for me. And then once I have my orchestration and arrangement finished, then I will move back into my DAW to create a realistic mockup if I'm not working with real musicians. Let's see here. Okay, awesome. So yeah, so you guys are answering each other's questions. Awesome. Let's continue on, shall we? So we've got, holy crap, how many? 42 people on already? Is that consecutive? How many people are watching right now? Oh no, 12. All right, I was gonna say, wow. All right, that's way more than we're used to. All right, so we've got violins 1, A and B. Again, A means it's a Cinesamples library. B just means that it's the same instrument, but I'm using Albion 1. Violins 2, we have panned violas. Violas have been done already with Cinesamples. Cinesamples is pre-panned. For Albion 1, I have found that violas tend to work well with 15 right. Celli, again, have been done. So then I find that about 30 right works well for celli. And then for basses, I tend to go around 35. Very subtle difference, but impactful all the same. So once you are done with panning, the next trick is reverb. And for reverb, I'm going to again pull up this little blog post. So the point of reverb is it's just supposed to mimic the effect that a room has on a sound. So when a sound is produced in a room, you actually hear 3 different waves of that sound hit you. The first one is called your direct sound. This is the sound that goes straight from the source to your ears. It doesn't hit any other sources. It doesn't hit any walls, any surfaces, any chairs. It doesn't hit anything else in the room. It goes straight from the source. Let's say a singer who's on stage, they're singing. Whatever sound waves go straight from their mouth to your ears, this is your direct sound. In reverb terms, this is called your dry signal, the signal that has not been impacted by your reverb. After that, we have early reflections. Early reflections are the sounds that come from the singer, bounce off maybe 1 or 2 surfaces, just a couple, but they find their way to your ears pretty quickly. And then we have the tail, which are all the sounds that have bounced off so many different surfaces that by the time they reach your ear, it kind of sounds like just kind of a wash of sound, a little bit of a room tone. Now, reverb imitates these 2. Reverb says, all right, here is the fake room you have designed with your plugin. Based off this room you have created, the early reflections and the tail are going to sound like this. And that sound is your actual reverb. That is the wet signal. Now, in reverb, there are typically a couple different things. Again, I am going to actually go to my Instagram page because I made a post about this recently. I'm going to show you guys, and it's just nice to have visual things while I'm helping out. Here we go. Reverb. Let's zoom in, shall we? Can we? I don't know if I can. Let's just zoom in a little bit. There we go. Okay. So you have your reverb mix, which is essentially what percentage of your sound is that direct signal versus the reverb signal. All right. The higher your mix, the farther away the source of your sound is going to be. So if you are very far from your source of your sound, chances are those sound waves are going to bounce off a whole bunch of surfaces before they actually hit your ears. So you're going to have less direct sound and much more reverb. If you are very close to the source, then chances are you're going to get a lot more direct sound. And you're not going to get as much, the sound isn't going to have as much time to bounce off a bunch of surfaces to reach your ears. After mix, we have size or tail. Size or tail is basically how long is your reverb. And it reflects how big the space is that you are trying to imitate with your sound. The bigger your room, the longer the tail is going to be. And we'll demonstrate this in a moment. Typically for orchestral music, about 1.5 to 3 seconds is best for your tail. And then reverb, color, or EQ is going to determine how subtle your reverb is. It imitates the kind of room you're in. A room with lots of hard surfaces won't absorb a lot of the high frequencies in your sound. And so your reverb is going to be a lot more noticeable. On the other hand, a reverb that has very soft surfaces is going to absorb a lot more of the higher frequencies, which will result in a much more subtle reverb, a little bit of a warmer reverb, if that makes sense. So let's demonstrate what this kind of sounds like. All right, so we've got violins 1s here. Right, good. Let's just add a random reverb. All right, we'll do Valhalla. Valhalla is a pretty decent one. So Valhalla, let's say we have 0 mix. We don't hear any reverb here. If we increase the mix to 100%, that means we're not hearing any more direct sound. All we're hearing is the reverb, the early reflections, and the tail, right? That's all we hear. Now, depending on the different settings we have of those 3 I showed you, we've got the mix, we've got the color, and we've got the size or tail. It can create a very different quality. So, for example, let's see, let's do decay. Decay is our tail. It keeps going. All right, 100 seconds is a little unrealistic. Let's try 5 seconds. 5 seconds is a pretty massive reverb. It creates the illusion of a bigger space. If we cut that down to 1 second, it's not as massive. Seems a bit smaller. Now, the high cut is our color in Valhalla. They have different names depending on the plugin you're working with. But if we were to say the high cut is super high, we're going to have a very noticeable reverb. If we bring it down, it's going to have a much more subtle reverb. Now, this becomes a lot more noticeable when we reduce the mix, so we have a combination of the two. All right, that's a very subtle reverb. A little more brighter, more noticeable. Again, subtle things, easier to notice if you're wearing headphones. Now, what this comes in useful for, there's a lot of different ways you can apply a reverb. Again, if you want a super in-depth thing, check out this blog post or buy the ebook. But all we are going to do is we are going to make sure that all of our strings, because they come from different libraries, are going to have a similar room. So what we're going to do is I have all of these libraries routed to go through this group track. All that means is that the sound signal taken from each of these libraries, first, their sound goes to the mockup group track. It goes here. And then from here, it goes to the stereo. So anything we apply to this track will impact all the others. Alternatively, you could just insert an individual plugin to every single one of these, but it's a little easier to just do insert it here. You can also do sends, again, if you want more impact on each of the, like a more detailed look. You can let me know if you want more information on this. For now, I'm just going to assume we're kind of moving forward. What I will recommend is, since both Albion 1 and Cinesamples already have pretty decent reverb involved with the libraries themselves, we're going to focus on just a small room. We're going to say a Studio Alpha is the one I usually go with. We're going to add a mix of about 30%. We're going to have a decay of about 1 second. And that's all we want, because the main focus here is just creating a similar color across each of the libraries so that we create the illusion that they're all being played in the same room. I don't still have the reverb on this, do I? Yeah, I still have the reverb on that. A very, very subtle difference, but it does help and it does add up, especially if you're working with libraries with significantly different sounds. If I were using a much drier library, for example, another one I frequently use is Spitfire Studio Strings Professional. This is a very dry library, meaning that they recorded it specifically trying to avoid any natural reverb from the room they were in. Then, in addition to the room reverber, I would try to add a little bit of a larger reverb with a longer tail to try and mimic the length of the reverb on the other libraries. But again, we're supposed to be just doing basic stuff today, so we're not going to dive too deep. Again, this blog post goes much more in detail on reverb if you want to dive into it. The last one we're going to do is EQ. First, I'm going to see if there's anyone else, any questions. Get along without knowing how to play piano. All right, so, Chicago Bob, thank you. I'm glad that you appreciate my lessons. Thank you for answering for this live. I love making music. Awesome, wonderful. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. So the last one we're going to do real quick is EQ. And for EQ, Again, there's a lot we could do here. EQ essentially removes frequencies. We're not going to go too in detail. Again, different libraries have different frequency issues. If you want a more detailed guide, again, check out my ebook. But for now, all we're going to say is we want to remove some of the room tone. We have a lot of libraries that are all going to be playing at the same time. And no matter how professional the library, everyone's going to have a little bit of just background noise, a very subtle background noise of just the room they were recorded in. Now, for each individual library, that might not be enough to be noticeable. But when you've got a bunch of libraries all playing at the same exact time, that tiny amount of room noise gets multiplied by the number of tracks you have. So a very simple way to clean it up is to take each of your instruments and say, I'm going to remove some of the frequencies that just aren't important. Specifically for the higher instruments, this is very useful to just go, all right, I'm going to use a low shelf. No, we'll do a cut at 12. I'm going to do about 120. Let's see. No, let's do a little. Trying to think which. It's 130, I believe, is low C. Yep. Low C is about 130. Violin doesn't go anywhere near low C. So we're just going to take that. We're going to phase out a little bit of that. So first, let's demonstrate something. Where are we? Let's do a violin. We were on violin 1A. So if I play violin, there's not a lot of room noise, but some libraries tend to have a bit more. We're just going to add a little bit of a low frequency, a high pass filter to just take care of it just in case. We're going to apply this frequency, again, about 130 hertz, which is low C. That's not necessary for violins, and it's not necessary for violas. We won't do that for cello. We'll go a little lower for cello. Again, just 12, 130. Because a cello, their lowest note is low C. And we don't want to cut too close to the lowest pitch of the voice of the instrument. Let's see here, violas. Just paste. Yeah, this is the wonderful part of doing MIDI mockups, is if you don't have a template and have this all pre-set up, it can take a little while. So for cello, since cello go much lower, we won't worry about it, actually. We won't apply EQ to the cello. We won't worry about that. If you wanted to, you could go lower, say like 100 hertz and apply one. I don't think it's going to be as important for this, though, because we don't have that many tracks, and I do want to keep this from getting too long. Excellent. So, all of that we just did, kind of the boring parts, is the pre-work. All right, all we're trying to do is create the illusion of a shared space for all of our libraries. We started by panning each of the string ensembles to make sure that each instrument was located roughly on stage where it needs to be located. We then applied a little bit of reverb to make sure that all the libraries sound like they were recorded in the same space together. And now we've applied a little bit of EQ just to make sure that some of the higher libraries aren't contributing to muddy room tone. Again, all of these three, and a little bit more, including mic tips, are covered in this blog post. All right, just go to my website, check out my blog, and look for Mastering Digital Spaces for Realistic Music, Essential Mic Positioning, Panning, and Reverb Techniques. It's an AI title, trying to get some SEO. But yeah, so check that out. Now we're going to get into some of the fun parts. All right, once we have all of our pre-work set up, we can start working on actually making the MIDI sound realistic, starting by recording each of the parts. I'm going to demonstrate two different methods. One, which is probably ideal, is just recording the parts with your keyboard. So what we're going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can see the note names. We're going to see this is the A above. There we go. Let's record in violin 1. We'll mute this, turn on the metronome, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to record this top part. I'm going to show you guys some cool stuff in just a bit. But the point that I want to see is what we're getting here by playing with the actual keyboard and using a metronome is we're already getting some natural variation in the velocity, which is how hard each note is played. We are also getting some nice little human imperfections in the timing, which again creates more of a realistic performance. Now, the nice thing is after you've done it, if you decide, all right, so this G4 right here on measure 4, that's a little too hard. I'm going to drop that down a little bit. You can make some adjustments. Another option is to just pencil it in. You can pencil it in. If you are going to pencil it in, for example, we will do this. I am going to copy this top line. I'm going to put it in to violins 2. Everything is super uniform. We want to change that a little bit. All right. First, we're going to drop the velocity to a little softer. You want to listen to it. What's going on? I thought I was supposed to mute it, solo this. I want to solo this one. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue these together because I don't want the notes to be played individually. I'm going to say the notes on an off beat are going to be lowered slightly. And I'm going to take just this note and this note. I'm going to strengthen them a bit because they're the start of each 4-bar phrase. You want to think about which notes do you want to have be a little bit stronger, which ones do you want to be played a little softer. Once you've gotten a general kind of shape, you can leave it like that. Again, the best approach is just to play it with your keyboard if possible. If your part is too fast, just reduce your tempo temporarily. I have done that so many times. I'm like, all right, if I was doing like 30-second notes at 90, I'm like, all right, that's too fast for me. I'm going to do like 20 BPM. I'm going to record this one part at a tempo I can do, and then I'll speed it back up to whatever I need. Once we've got that, like I said, the best way to do it is to just record each part in one at a time. So that's what we'll do with the other ones. Let's do violas next, which are, let's go to voice, or was it voice or part? Yeah, voice. Violas, we got violas here. Let's open that up. There we go. We've got our violas written. Let's see. So DL, how do you get the VSTs to sound good like in a movie scores? Through all of these steps. So the first chunk that we did in this video, we talked about setting the stage. Right now we are recording the parts, and then after we've got the recorded parts, that's when we'll start talking about the kind of the stuff that you guys probably came here to learn, right? But all of them are necessary. All of them are very necessary to create realistic performances. So I will speed things up a little bit, just because I know you guys are probably getting impatient. Let's go back up. We will do cello next. I'll show you guys a cool little shortcut in Cubase. So we've got our cello recorded. Lastly, let's do our basses, which we don't need to do the whole thing because the basses only come in halfway through. All right, so we've got our parts recorded. Next, to just get everything spread across both the Cinesamples and Albion 1, I'm going to click this. I will hit the Alt button on my keyboard and just drag down. Since each of these are meant to be just kind of layerings of the same section, so Violas A, Cinesamples, and Violas B, Albion 1, since I'm combining multiple libraries, I don't need to worry about playing in every single one. You can if you want a little added realism, but you can also just, like I said, Alt-click and copy. And so far, we have a slightly more realistic performance. Main issue is you can tell there's a lot of wacky balance things going on. These violins are way louder than everyone else, and it's throwing the whole thing off. Which brings us to the next one. CC number 11, expression. So CC, if you ever see these two letters, CC followed by a letter, it means continuous controller followed by the designated number. So continuous controller number 11 is something called expression. You can consider this as one of the many tools for controlling dynamics. Now, Cubase has this really, really cool little tool where it's called Articulations and Dynamics, where I can just say, hey, I want this to be mezzo forte. I can go dynamic mapping, set it to expression, pick the full range I want to work with, and boom. Now, this section is set to have the dynamics set to mezzo forte. However, not every library has that, or not every DAW has that. So we are going to go to CC, Continuous Controller number 11, Expression. And for our dynamics, I have a handy little conversion table. These are approximate values. They don't have to be specific. You can find your own. I have found that mezzo forte comes out to about 74. So you're going to go here. We are going to find approximately 74. We're just going to set our dynamic level. And we are going to do this for each of our libraries. We're going to open, go to expression, paste. Go to expression, paste. I'm going to need to expand these, aren't I? Let's expand these a little bit. There we go. And then we will go to viola 2A, or this is violin, I guess, 2. There is no viola 2. Now we go to violas, and again, all I'm doing is I am setting the expression data to mezzo forte for all of these, because I tend to just, in general, default to mezzo forte. If I want something a little softer, then I'll do mezzo piano, but I tend to default to mezzo forte, so I have room to grow in either direction. I can get much louder, I can get much softer. I'm going to set this. Now, there are multiple tools for controlling the dynamics in a MIDI mockup, each one doing something slightly different. We will be addressing each of them, or at least each of the most important ones. Let's see here, expression, we will add it here. And again, this is one of the beautiful things that mockups are a fairly tedious thing at times. But now, if we listen to it again, we're already going to see that the balance is a little bit better. Violin ones are still a little bit big from what I'd like. We'll touch on that in a bit. Awesome. So after expression, the next thing we want to tackle is modulation. Now, modulation is probably the most important out of all of these. If there was only one thing I would teach you how to use to make your sound library sound a little more important, like lively, a little more realistic, I would recommend modulation. Now, modulation does something very similar to expression. It controls the volume of the instrument, but it does so in a slightly different way. For expression, increasing your expression or decreasing the expression just literally controls the volume, and that's it. Modulation changes the actual sample that you're working with, because the goal is to imitate the impact that volume has on the color or sound of your instrument. So, for example, here's a cello. With a high modulation, we hear a little more brightness. If we come down, you're going to notice a difference in the color. It becomes a little more mellower, a little more buzzier. Now, this becomes significantly easier to notice in instruments like the brass section. So let's pull up a brass instrument. Solo trumpet. Do I have any that are loaded? Here we go. We'll wait for this to load. Should have had this loaded beforehand. Sorry, people. Oh, wait, no. It's because this one's not downloaded. All right, my bad, my bad. Let's see here. Trumpet ensemble. Let's do solo trumpet. We'll load this one. There we go. This one's loading. All right. Any question? How do you get the VST sounds loaded? No, I'm trying to. I'm not. I'm jelly because I'm not good at it. How do you get those Arabic instrument tones? They play their instruments differently in the Middle Eastern. That is a good question. So DL asks, how do you get the specific tones of different instruments for different cultures, specifically Arabic music? That's going to depend on the instrument you're working with. The goal of a MIDI mockup is essentially to just create a realistic performance for the instruments you're looking for. So it helps a lot to know what the instruments are. So let's listen to this, see? Notice how it becomes a little brighter near the top. Now, another example we can use, I should have used Albion 1 or a Spitfire library. So Spitfire is an excellent example for this because Spitfire tends to have incredibly detailed libraries to the point where it can actually be a little difficult at times to get the sound you want because they are so freaking customizable. So we'll load a trumpet library from Spitfire and we'll be able to hear a super bright quality at the top, much more mellower quality at the bottom. So if we have, let's see here. There we go. You hear how it becomes much mellower, a lot softer. Not just in the volume, but the color changes. Now as I increase the modulation, I'll get a visual here. You can watch with the dynamics. You'll see how the color, the personality of the sound changes. Super soft, super weak. Much brassier, much brighter. There's subtle differences, but the whole point is that modulation controls not just the impact of the volume, but the impact that your sound will have on the overall flow. Not flow, the overall personality and color of the sound as well. Now, there are two different options you can use here. You can use a couple different options. You can use the mod wheel. The mod wheel is that little modulation wheel on your keyboard that allows you to move it up and down and control the modulation data. That requires a little intuition about how each note should improve, how the dynamic should shift. If you don't feel very comfortable trying to do a live performance with a mod wheel, there is also the option to use the pencil tool. My recommended technique for using the pencil tool for modulation is to start with larger numbers and create a basic shape. So if we got this, so I'm going to say I want this to get a little bit louder up to about here. Then we'll come back down here. I want to create like a rising then falling shape. Then I'll do the same thing over here, rise, and then I want to come down over here. Once you've created a general shape with larger values, you pick something super small and you connect the dots. Now the tricky part with this is you can't actually hear the performance live as you're doing it. So I would recommend, it's going to be tedious, but we are going to go one at a time and we are going to add the modulation data manually. And I'm going to come back down. Now, if you want a guide, if you're one of those people who's like, you just need some kind of rule to follow, in general, the beginning of a phrase starts to glide up. And from there, at the end, it tends to fade out. From there, you can just follow the shape of your notes for strings. For stringed instruments, if the notes are moving up, you move the modulation up. If they're moving down, you move it back down. So you'll notice that I have a single held out note for a long time, so I gradually grew. But then when the notes start coming back down, I come back down with them. When the notes come back up, I start to grow again until it comes down, and then it goes back up, and it comes back down. It just follows the general shape. So now if we record this one, With Spitfire, Spitfire again tends to be much more detailed libraries. Again, almost to the point of being overwhelming at times. We are going to record this one while listening. There we go. We've got our modulation data in. Now let's do violins 2. And this is going to take a while, people. I'm sorry. That's one of the downsides of doing live lessons is I can't edit out all the tedious stuff. Then we're going to do violins 2. Because again, the reason why I don't copy or paste for modulation data is because every library is a bit different. Again, the modulation behavior for cinesamples is going to, like a cinestrings is going to be very different from the modulation behavior of Albion 1. And again, I just follow the general shape of the melody. If the pitch goes up, my modulation goes up. If the pitch goes down, I'm coming down. Is that the most realistic performance? It's not the most realistic, but it creates a more expressive nature that works really well for most pieces. If, again, you want something much more detailed and focused on being hyper-realistic, check out my ebook on making realistic MIDI mockups. You can find that, as well as all kinds of super cool stuff, on my website. Go to Bookshop, and it's this one, the Guide to MIDI Mockups. Only $25. But yes, back to the material, because we have much to cover still. Let's see here. Let's go to modulation. Again, a little boring, but we got this. All right, starting to come together a little bit. All right, so another interesting little tool, if you want to create a more realistic modulation performance, is to think of everything as being as part of a phrase. So like 4-bar phrases. Most phrases in music get a little louder, and then they get a little softer. This happens to also follow the shape of the notes for the cello part. But again, if you don't feel like you are confident in being able to draw in your own modulation data, it's a nice little guideline that you can work with. Oh, that was violas, not cello. Now let's do the cello. Cello is one that I'm going to try to use that modulate that shape of like starting with the phrase instead of going with the note passes. The note shapes. I'm going to follow the phrase shape. So get louder, get quieter. Again, the whole point of each of these strategies is to create a little bit more of an expressive nature to your sound. You'll hear that in terms of music. Music, when you hear the term expressive, it means that the musicians or instruments are making small changes to the timbre, the pitch, and or the dynamics in real time. Based off how they feel, it creates the most expressive performance of the most emotional performance of the music. So modulation, again, allows us to change the dynamics and timbre while each note is being played. If you're working with shorter note values, like rhythmic strings, you don't need modulation. You just use your velocity data. Velocity is basically the same thing as modulation. It just has to do with the start of each note. While modulation changes the value throughout the duration of a note, velocity just hits the very starting value, which is all you need for super short note values. Man, I feel like I am not very articulate today. I keep falling over my own words. Let's see here, though. We're almost done with modulation. Let's keep going. All right, here we go. Wait, why did the modulation data not show? Oh, I added it to that one. I forgot to. Okay, sorry, that's on me. We're going to have to redo that one. Go. And now we just have basses left. Let's get this done. There we go. Last one. There we go. All right, so where did my notes go? Did I accidentally exit out of that one? All right. Here we go. Control-Shift-T. Saves so much. It allows you to open up tabs from Google that you accidentally closed out of. So we've done modulation. The last one to do is vibrato, which is optional. Not all libraries need them. For example, the Cinesample ones do not need them. Cinestrings, I'm using Legato Espressivo, which already adds vibrato gradually as the library is done, is performed. So something, I should probably explain what vibrato is. Vibrato, it's best to actually just kind of demonstrate. Wait, why is it? Oh, modulation. So we've got a nice sound here. You're going to hear little vibrations up and down, like ha, where the pitch moves up and down a little bit. Without vibrato, it sounds like a very simple, straight tune. As we add more vibrato, you hear a little more instability, a little more color added to the tone. So again, Cinesamples already takes care of this for you. Albion 1, again, one of the strengths and kind of downsides of Spitfire libraries is they're incredibly detailed. So you have potential to create more realistic sounding mockups, but it requires more effort to make it sound good out of the box. So for vibrato, vibrato is typically continuous controller number 21. It is not standardized, which means it won't always be the case, but it's about a safe bet. And that's the case for Albion libraries, or Spitfire libraries. So the general idea behind vibrato is it's going to match your dynamics as long as you've got longer note values. As the note gets louder, the amount of vibrato increases. As it comes down, it reduces. So the trick is you can basically just follow the general shape of your modulation to draw in your vibrato. Now, again, every library is unique. So we're going to listen to this one. We're going to watch. I find that for vibrato in Spitfire, between this tick mark and this tick mark tends to work really well. So we're going to watch this phrase to make sure it stays there. All right, so I could probably stand to increase it a little bit. Get a bit more dramatic. Ideally, if you have multiple faders, it's easier to just play this in as well. There we go. I'm right within those 2 tick marks that I like. Now, the nice thing about vibrato is you only really need it for the main line. Chords, accompaniment, they don't really need vibrato, but the melody or top line of a chord progression like this should have it. So we're not going to have to go through this entire thing and add it. Once you have done that, the last little thing we'll do before mixing it is tempo mapping. So right now, our tempo is at a beautiful 90 BPM. Constant, strict. All right, I'm going to move all of these over here so that we can work with a more realistic performance on this one. Actual musicians, actual performances are not going to be so meticulous. So what we are going to do is we're going to use a nice little beat tapping method. In fact, we're just going to actually just do a MIDI track. Add a random MIDI track. Where is it? Oh yeah, MIDI track. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to play along. I'm going to listen to the metronome. And with each beat 1, I'm going to play a note. So like beat 1 of 11, beat 1 of 12, I'm going to hit a note. Just a random note on my keyboard. Because we want to record almost like you're trying to conduct your band. All right, so now I have my MIDI. All right, and you'll notice each of these are incredibly imperfect. None of them land exactly on beat 1, which is exactly what I want. I want that human imperfection. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this little MIDI track. I'm going to go to MIDI. I'm going to go to Functions. And I'm going to go to, where is it? Merge Tempo from Tapping. Different DAWs have different names for this. You can. I hate to be that guy to say Google it, but you're probably gonna have to Google it. It's typically beat mapping, but merge tempo from tapping, you can try looking that up. All I'm gonna say is I'm gonna tell it how frequently I tapped for this one. For me, I tapped once at the beginning of every bar. I'm going to hit OK, and boom. If I now pull up a tempo track, you will see that over here, let's take our top, let's bring it down to 108. Take our bottom, we'll bring it up to about 85 or 73. You'll notice that up under this one, we have a nice picture perfect constant 90 BPM. But the moment we get over here, the tempo changes ever so slightly every single measure. And it's going to create a more realistic performance of the tempo, as if the musicians are following an actual conductor. So the very last thing we're going to do, and this is probably going to be one of the most useful and one of the most annoying parts of this entire thing, is we are going to now mix. And I'm going to show y'all a nice little tool. We're going to mix each of these, find the balance of each one using something called the pink noise method. Pink noise is a type of static. It has a horrible, horrible sound. So I am going to warn you, you're going to want to lower down your volume. All right, if you are watching this, reduce your volume right now, because this is going to be quite unpleasant. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each, I'm going to go to Studio, Mix Console. I'm going to take all of my instruments that I just added, that I've been working with. I'm going to drop their volume to 0. Oops. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to listen to them one at a time against the pink noise. The pink noise, again, creates this terrible staticky sound. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen to each instrument. Nope, don't want all of them, just one. I'm going to listen to each one at a time. And I'm going to gradually increase the volume until I can just barely hear that sound. All right? Over the static. All right, I can hear it. So now I'm going to keep that volume in mind, and I'm going to go one at a time, doing the same thing for each one. There we go. So now let's just kind of listen to these two. We can hear that these two violins are now going to sound a bit more balanced. One isn't louder than the other. It's going to be more noticeable when we do different instruments. But you're going to notice why this pink noise is important, because this one, for the Albion 1, we needed to have a 3.73 decibel increase. Whereas on Cinesamples, to create the same level, we needed a minus 0.51, or about there. So there's a sizable difference between the two. The reason why this works, and you'll see more of what I mean by works, is because pink noise has all of the frequencies at a relatively equal volume. Let me pull you guys up. I just realized I'm not watching your stuff. And yes, so I lost my train of thought. So let's just keep going. Oops. Violin 2, and we want the pink noise, as terrible as it is. Violin 2, yep. And see, a -5. So these are all over the place in terms of balance. And again, I'm kind of rushing through this. I'm going to be honest, I'm rushing through this just because it's such an unpleasant sound for a live stream. But you'll want to take your time, really dial it in, but you'll be amazed at the impact it will have. And then basses, we're going to need to have a shortened area so we can actually hit them. There we go. So now we have balanced each of these against the pink noise. Let's hear what they actually sound like without it. We're going to notice that they all sound significantly more properly balanced. Oh, that's nice. I'm going to increase the volume just a little bit. Let's see. Where are we? Well, minus 22. Let's just add 8 decibels to the gain to make it a little bit louder. And now, after all of that work, which it gets much quicker as you get more used to the workflow, we started by creating a bit more unity between our different libraries and creating a more realistic positioning instead of just putting everything in the same track. We then recorded each part to add a little bit more of a human performance. We then took care of a couple of continuous controllers to give a more expressive performance. And then we added a little bit of tempo mapping to create a more human interpretation of the beat. So now what we are going to do is we're going to listen to this entire thing. We're going to listen first to just the simple out-of-the-box library, Albion 1, everything in an ensemble patch. Then we will listen to the performance of the whole thing put together with all of the added kind of like tricks and stuff. Personally, I'd like to reduce the volume of these violins, actually. I feel like I didn't give them enough attention. Let's see. There we go. That sounds better to me. All right, so subtle little differences here and there, but these are really all incredibly useful tools for creating much more expressive performances of all of your different MIDI instruments, especially with longer pieces. It can be a little difficult to appreciate the difference and nuance of performances for an 8-bar chord progression, but when you apply these tools to a melody or variations of the same melody across a different piece, you'd be amazed at how incredibly impactful they can be on creating the personality of the performance you're producing in your DAW. So that brings me to the end of this complicated stream, actually. I feel like that was quite a bit of information. I hope it was very helpful. I will probably condense all of this information and release it as a video. That way it's more easier to break down and you guys can follow it. It's a little bit more organized. I got some cool ideas about how I would try to reteach this. Just from this experience of teaching it live. But I hope it was helpful. All right, let's see. Any comments? So DL, the EQ is generating the pink noise. No, so the pink noise is an actual dedicated audio file I keep on my computer. You can have synthesizers that produce pink noise. All pink noise is, like I said, is a specific type of static. What makes it unique is this. If you notice, the line is almost straight. All frequencies are present at approximately an equal volume. So the reason why pink noise works really well for getting an initial balance is because each of your instruments, you can use it as a reference. If you can hear your instrument over the pink noise, it's probably going to be balanced with all the others because all the other instruments need to be heard over the pink noise, no matter what the frequency impact is, because higher frequencies tend to sound louder than lower frequencies. There's a whole bunch of stuff into it, but it's a very simple thing. You can Google pink noise audio samples. You can find them on YouTube. You can find them anywhere. It's a useful balancing tip for mixing that you can find very frequently, like anywhere online. Oh, someone already answered that. What is the volume level on your master channel now? Volume level on my master channel is going to be a little reduced. Minus 5.9. The mix probably isn't that loud. That was just from the pink noise, which is, yeah, minus 6. How How many like? Yes, Ricardo, thank you. Yes, don't forget to like the stream, people, if you want to see more stuff like this. Likes are very helpful to help the channel grow. YouTube likes to see that people are being engaged with the stream. With this pink noise method, could you use it to gain stage your different libraries? Oh, of course, that's what I do. I use the pink noise method to gain stage all of my libraries while creating a template. So the template that I created for the Skyrim videos, that I use the pink noise method to gain stage and make sure they were all kind of balanced. Again, that is significantly more in depth than I planned on going in today's video. If you want to learn a really cool way for setting up your own templates, where you have basically those first couple steps of setting the digital space, check out Zach Heidi. Zach Heidi has amazing videos on setting up templates for your computer. Yes, and Ricardo, yes, so don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for the reminder, Ricardo. Yes, the little changes do add up over time to create a significantly more realistic and personal and expressive sound. A lot of knobs I don't use or how to use. Okay, so DL, I have a keyboard controller that has pitch and modulation controls on it and a lot of knobs that I don't use or know how to use. The Alesis V149. How do I use MIDI continuous controllers with it? Typically, if your keyboard has a bunch of knobs and sliders, they're customizable. So you'll want to read the manual for your keyboard to figure out how to assign them. But I would say you want to set them to modulation, expression, and vibrato would be typically the three most useful. If you don't have access to it, again, you can just open it in your MIDI editor. So if we go here, show used controllers, we'll see that right now I manipulated velocity, modulation, and expression, which are the ones that we talked about in this one. This video. If we go to violin 1B, which was my Spitfire library that we needed to adjust the vibrato for, if we go to used controllers, you'll see that it's the same thing, but it also has controller 21, which is vibrato for Spitfire libraries. Do you ever use a toy? Have you ever used the Toy Suite library from UVI? I cannot say that I have. Haven't been able to use it successfully in my hip hop tracks, but I'm not good yet. Not professional. No worries. You can always get better. I wouldn't say you're not good. You're just a novice, right? How can I get good use out of an expensive library? Practice. Honestly, that's all it is. You got to practice, get to know the library. So even though I have a lot of libraries, I tend to have several that I gravitate towards. Like I said, my go-to libraries for strings are Albion 1. I use Cinestrings from Musio as my bass for my violins. And then I will use Albion 1 to add a little bit more of kind of like a cohesion. I use Albion 1 as like a glue to kind of bring them all together and create a bit bigger space. But those are my go-to. I just say once you just practice the library, learn how it sounds, learn all the little idiosyncrasies, something that cannot be overstated, I mean, read the manuals. If you buy a library, you should read the manual, people. I know it sucks. It's not the most interesting stuff. But for example, if you go here, I believe you hit information. Where is it? No, it's if you go to a contact library and you right click, where is it? It's somewhere. Oh, you're right here. User manual. It's the arrow next to the name. Hit the arrow. Albion 1 user manual. You click on that. You want to read it. You want to read about all the different controls you have for your instrument because you want to know what it's capable of. And I don't know why I clicked on it. This is going to take forever to open because Cortana does not work well on Microsoft Edge does not work well on my computer for some reason. But yeah, read your sound libraries. Manuals, people. It's the best way to learn how to use them. They usually have really cool tips. And you're going to learn a lot about how it was designed, how it was intended to be used. Lots of cool stuff. You'll never know what you learn. All right. Yes, and track delay is an important one. This was a very basic rundown of MIDI mockups. I wanted to cover just the most important stuff, the basic stuff that you want to make sure you learn. But yes, I am thinking we're probably good. All right, so couple different things. I meant to mention this earlier. The 8th cohort of my Emotions in Music class starts Monday. This is probably one of my favorite things I do. I teach all about portraying emotions with music. You get 6 weeks of modules, of articles, videos to watch. You get 6 weekly live lessons similar to like this, but only you actually get on the call with me, so you can interact with me besides just chats. And you get weekly feedback on all the music that you write during the class. So it's a really fun class. I really enjoy talking with everybody. You get part of a private Discord group with me. You learn a lot in the course. There's some really cool reviews. I've got to add more of them. This past cohort, I had a psychologist, a PhD psychologist who's also a film composer, join the class, and he told me it was exactly what he was hoping it would be, which is amazing feedback because, not gonna lie, I was a little nervous when I saw a PhD of psychology was joining my psych and music course. But check it out. There are payment plans. I don't know why I exited out of that because I wanted to show you guys some other stuff. Check out, again, my bookshop. If you want a significantly more detailed look at mockups, the Guide to MIDI Mockups is a very good guide that I put together a while ago. And you can also, if you get my textbook, there are chapters dedicated to it. Basically, everything found in this book is also found in my textbook on composing. But with that, I think we are going to call it a day, people. Thank you to everyone who stopped by. I had a lot of fun with this stream. I hope you did as well. I hope it was very informative. And yeah, I'll see y'all next week. What is next week? Is next week the last Friday of the month? I don't think it is. It is. All right, so next week's stream will be live feedback. Follow me on Instagram. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification. If you want free feedback on your music, you want to keep an eye out for the announcement. I will make a post, not a video, a post with instructions on how to share your music with me. And then next Friday, I will be listening to people's music and I will be giving constructive, supportive feedback. It's a lot of fun. The chat is super supportive of everybody as well. So check it out. It's an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow. And honestly, it's one of my favorite streams to do every month. So I will see you next month, or next week. Again, sorry, little sleep deprived. I will see you all next week and I'm looking forward to it. All right. Have a good one. Bye-bye.